Welcome to the Emily Rassam Show, the podcast that proves parenting, business, and home life can all be juggled, just not always gracefully. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share because laughter and maybe chaos is better when it's spread around. Hello, and welcome to the Emily Rassam Show. I am your host, Emily, and today I am joined by Deborah Gertner. She is the founder of Plant Forward Endurance Nutrition. She is from Colorado, and she is a USAT certified coach. She's going to tell you more about what that means after this, but we're going to start with her backstory and how she got into this as a career. Tell us more.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me and just getting to talk with you and your folks. Yeah, so I'll jump right in. A little bit about me. So I live in Longmont, Colorado, mom of two. My kiddos are 7 and 10. I've got a couple of senior dogs, but my story kind of like going way back when, I guess we could kind of start around like college when I started experiencing all of like the mystery GI symptoms of, you're away from home and eating things college students eat and studying and under all of the stress of what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And also, please write this 10-page paper. I, at one point in, I think my first semester, came down with mono and everything changed after that. So I all of a sudden was having all of this mystery stomach pain. I kept going to the health center. I went to a doctor. Like no one could really figure out what was going on. At one point, I went in for like some GI studies and some testing, and everything was kind of like, we don't really know. Here's a pill. And at that point, I started paying closer attention to what I was eating and how I was feeling. And I got to the point where I kind of navigated on my own that I was having some intolerances. I was having some issues and figured out around age 19, dairy just is not in the cards for me. And so that kind of was the start of things. And over time, like I feel like I had just kind of given up and accepted, like, oh, I'm just always going to have these stomach issues. I'm always going to feel kind of meh. I'm never going to be like this super active person until I decided that that didn't have to be me. I had always kind of like had in the back of my mind, how cool would it be to be like one of those runners, like one of those people who could just like go out for a run?
Right. And like it.
Right? And I met someone whose husband at the time was like recruiting people to run a half marathon for charity. And it was just like, well, cool. So you're going to give me a training plan. You're going to give me a coach. I'm going to run, or I'm going to raise money for this organization. It was the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America. And like, so I'm raising money for a good cause and I get to go do this thing that I've always dreamed about doing. And it was kind of this easy yes for me. I was hooked. I fell like head over heels in love with it. And once I started kind of getting into the running world, I started paying closer attention to what I was eating, even more so than before. But I was also starting to toy with this idea of like, what if I went back to school? Because I graduated with a degree in anthropology and global development studies. And what do you do with a degree in anthropology in 2008 when there's no
Right.
jobs? Like, what do I do? You go back to school for something else. And so at that point, I decided, like, hey, I really love food. I love talking to people. I want to be a helper. I could be a dietitian. And so that was kind of that set me on this path, right? Like I was this runner. I was looking into what can I do to improve my health? What can I do to improve my running? Nutrition's a big part of that.
It really is.
Huge.
Hands down. It's probably the most important part.
I mean, in triathlon, we call it the fourth discipline, but we can get to triathlon here in a minute too. Yeah, at that time when I was looking at going back to school, I was doing these like informational interviews. I think I was working for a running store at the time too, and I met this woman who, like, when you look back in life and you're just like, you can pinpoint these moments of like, this is where this big shift happened.
Yes.
I met with this incredible woman, is a former like middle school science teacher turned dietitian. And she sat me down and she's just like, here's what this job is all about. And also, have you looked into this research around going plant-based in order to prevent or in some cases reverse all of these chronic health conditions? And everything she named was everything that's in my family history, like cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure, there's so many different diseases and conditions that are influenced by what we eat. And here we have this primary research, we have this literature that is showing there is this big connection with what we're eating. And if we move along this spectrum toward including more plants and kind of going more plant-based, you can significantly reduce your risk, or in some cases, reverse those disease processes. And once I looked at that research and really looked at what that could mean for me, I was hooked. There was no going back. And I was already eating mostly vegetarian because, again, when you're right out of college and you're broke, beans and rice are cheap.
Yes. Yes, they are.
Yeah, so that was just over 16 years ago now that I decided to make the switch. And I'm not planning to go back anytime soon, if ever. Probably never, because a couple of years after that, so I was in my degree program working toward becoming a dietitian. I already had 2 marathons under my belt, and I just did not feel right. I didn't feel good. I went to a doctor who looked at me. We ran some blood tests, and she said, "You know what? You're probably fine, but let's follow up." And we thought it could be my thyroid. Turns out we were right. Sent me for additional testing, sent me for ultrasounds, biopsies, sent me to an endocrinologist. And all along the way, this testing was coming back inconclusive. We couldn't quite figure out what was going on. They ended up sending me to a surgeon. The plan was, well, we're going to take at least half of your thyroid and we're going to biopsy it while you're still under anesthesia. And it came back, it was cancer. I was 27 years old and I had stage 1 follicular thyroid cancer. And really, again, kind of looking back, there was no real way that I could have prevented that. I was doing everything quote unquote right, where I was exercising, I'm eating well, paying attention to my body, kind of trying to take care of myself. And I still got sick. I got unlucky, lost the genetic lottery, as it were, on that front, where there was just that strong genetic component. But knowing that has really informed kind of how I live my life, even now, of just, again, continuing with this plant-based diet. I continue on with movement, with exercise. And I have this fantastic relationship with my doctors where, yeah, I see them regularly. I saw my endocrinologist this week. We have a great relationship.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's really a testament to, I know I feel like when I get into a really bad situation, it's when I learn and grow the most. And it sounds like that been a very pivotal moment in your career because now you have that connection and even greater empathy for your clients. And that's really a beautiful thing. And, I'm sure you're passing along that information to your family too, and changing those generational eating habits that so many people have, because we eat what we grew up with or etc. And I love your story. It's such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it with us. And then tell me about how you got into triathlons after this.
Yeah. Believe it or not, it was my endocrinologist when I
Really?
lived in Minnesota. She was the one. So I had done marathons and I worked at this running store. And I always looked at these or triathletes who would come into the store. And it was just they were the cool kids, right? You kind of have the friend crush on the cool kids in high school,
Right.
just those people. And that was how I saw these. They're oh, these mythical cool beings who do triathlon. And so it was always kind of in the back of my head, that would be really cool to do someday. And I remember I was teaching a learn to run clinic and we were doing this goal setting workshop. And talking through, when we're setting these goals, especially when it comes to running or exercise or whatever it is, this idea that we set these tiers, right? Where it's okay, tier 1, this is this thing that I'm going to do that's really achievable. I could do it in a couple weeks with a little bit of preparation. And tier 2 is okay, this is a little bit of a stretch of this is going to take some work, but I could do this maybe in a few months. And then there's that shoot for the moon, really stretch goal.
Right.
And that was the first time that I said out loud, I want to do an Ironman someday. I had no idea what was involved in a triathlon. Aside from oh, it's swimming, biking, and running. But I didn't know what was involved in an Ironman. I just knew it was a really hard thing.
Right.
And a couple years later is when I was going through that testing process and then cancer treatment, which for me was one surgery, and I take a pill every day for the rest of my life. But at the time, my endocrinologist that I was seeing looked at me. She said, "Hey, there's this race in August. It's a women's only sprint triathlon. I do it every year with a bunch of my girlfriends and as many of my clients as I can convince, as many of my patients as I can convince to do it with me. I really think that you should do this with me." And so this person reached out and invited me to join her team to do this race. And it was such an easy yes, where it was like, oh man, like I get to do this. And so I had to learn how to swim,
You
like
didn't
most
swim
of us.
before?
I didn't swim before.
That's impressive.
I knew how not to drown, but there's a
Okay.
difference between not drowning and swimming.
Right, right.
So I had to learn how to swim, which of course all went out the window. Like when I got to race day and I side stroked that whole 500 yards. It was a sight. And then I did the bike and the run. And after that, I was hooked. I was like, yes, I want more of this. I'm going to do an Ironman in like 2 years. That didn't happen right away. It took me another 12 years uh, to do an actual Ironman.
That's how life works, isn't it?
It
It
really
really
is.
is. I know
Mhm.
I always joke with my friends. I've only done one triathlon and I want to do a ruck race next. Coordinating your arms and legs is really hard when you're figuring out how to swim if you haven't, like been on a swim team or etc. And then one day I read through all the triathlon boards and someone said, "Don't use your legs. You need those for the other two segments." And I said, "Okay, I'll swim with my arms." I just did that. It's a fun sport. You can just adapt and do what works.
I side stroked my first one, you know.
Yeah,
I don't recommend that though for folks who are
right.
looking to get into this.
Maybe on a sprint triathlon, it's not a big deal.
It's not as big a deal. That's true. Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
I want to talk about then what is your USAT certification? What does that mean? Can you
Yes.
define that and tell us what is an Ironman and why does everyone that does an Ironman have a tattoo? I'm just kidding. And too funny, too funny.
All right. So when we look at different sports, like different countries have their different national governing bodies. So, for example, like USA Track and Field is the governing body for like track and field at a certain level. Or we think of like NCAA is like the governing body of college sports. And so USAT is USA Triathlon. It's our national governing body for triathlon. And basically what they do is like they go in and they sanction races to say, okay, like, yep, this is basically they have our liability insurance is like one of the big things that they handle. But they also handle things like standardized rules for these races of what's allowed and what's not allowed. So we're all kind of sort of playing by the same rules. But in terms of like the governing body certifying coaches, what this means is that I went through the USA Triathlon course to become a level 1 coach. And my primary motivation in doing that was actually to start a youth triathlon program in my city. So that was the primary motivator. The secondary motivator, yes, I coach adults and I get to like blend my work as a registered dietitian and help people achieve their triathlon goals as well, because the sport is more fun with friends and it's more fun when you have that
Yes.
support where someone can walk you through like this is how we train and this is how we race and you feel so supported the whole way. Yeah, so a level 1 coach basically, like I said, just means I've done the coursework and the continuing education requirements to maintain that credential. And with USAT, it goes up to level 3. So there's level 2 and there's level 3. And a lot of that just has to do with time, how many hours you've coached various athletes, your experience in the sport, and then the courses that you've taken.
I love that. Thank
Mhm.
you for anyone who doesn't know anything about triathlons, because that used to be me. And
That's
it used to
okay.
be you.
It
Um,
did used to be me. We were going to talk about Ironman too.
yes, tell me about that. Oh, yes, tell us about how far you had to go.
So, an Ironman is one of the standardized distances in triathlon because when we talk about sprint triathlon, there's not really like a standard distance. It's just anything shorter than an Olympic distance. So, could be like a 500-yard swim. It could be a 700-yard swim. It's everything in between. And it's not usually, it's either a pool or open water for a sprint. For an Olympic, I'm going to mess up my distances if I don't look this up because I've only ever done like one course that's an Olympic distance race.
Well, it would just say it's further. It's further.
It's further. It is further.
Yes, it's between Ironman and sprint. Yes.
And a half Ironman is a 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a 13.1 mile run. In that order, a full Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 mile run, which for those of you following along at home is a marathon.
Yes, it's very far. Tell us the Ironman distances.
So an Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 mile run, which is a full marathon.
Yes, it's a lot.
It is. It's a very long day.
And you can see why nutrition is very important in these kind of races because you're running out of all of your kind of supply during the race. You need water, you need carbs to keep going, etc. So then I want to talk about how you said on your website, and I love this, food should be empowering and not restrictive. And I'm going to read a little quote that you put in there because I loved it so much in the way it was written. Because fueling your body shouldn't be about perfection. It should be about strength, endurance, and the freedom to thrive. So can you tell us about how fueling works kind of for a race or every day a little bit? I know one of the things a lot of people stress about is carbs, and there are better times to consume them than others, like maybe not when you're about to go sit on your couch, which is when we all love to eat those kind of things. As an example, tell us more.
Absolutely. So I like to look at food as fuel. And it's so much more than that. I've got this background in anthropology and nutrition. And so I take this approach to food where it's how we connect with each other. It's how we connect with our culture, how we connect maybe with our family or with our past or connect with other cultures and other people. So food is not good or bad in and of itself. We can find ways to use food that feels really empowering, that can support our mood. Yeah, can support our whole person because you're a person, you're not a machine, right? So it's like we put gasoline in a car, but we eat food. And when it comes to things like exercise or endurance sports, we look at what are the different fuel systems. Again, you're not a car, but kind of.
I mean, I do that with my kids. I'm like, is this a premium fuel or is this, the cheap grade test? Okay. Because my kids are little, so that's what we talk about. Can I fly an airplane to outer space with this or a rocket? Or is this my junk car that's going to, while it's trying to drive? Yeah. So sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Or sometimes I'll use this analogy of like a campfire. Like when we're building a campfire, you have like the logs that are like our slow burning. You throw on a big log and okay, this is going to burn for several hours. And then we've got like our little twigs that are maybe like our kindling where it's like, this is just going to like flash out like in a moment. Right. And then we have kind of things that are in between. So that can also be a helpful analogy when we're thinking about different foods and how that's supporting our long-term health. So things like the quick fuels, amazing when we're doing things like going for an exercise, like going for a run or going for a bike ride, or even if we're going to lift weights at the gym or going for a walk, we have to fuel our body because our muscles deserve that support and it deserves to have adequate fuel. Because when we don't have adequate fuel, your body's going to get it from somewhere and we can't pick and choose where our body is getting that fuel from. So we can't say, oh, I really want to lose this belly fat, so I'm going to go for this like 2-hour walk and not eat anything beforehand. That's not really how that works. Okay. So when we talk about like fueling for performance or fueling for these like epic things that we're doing with our bodies, we look at how are we giving the energy to do those things. And a lot of that is carbohydrates. So we look at how can we be strategic about our logs versus our kindling. So things like if you're about to go for a run, you're going to want the quick burning fuel that's not going to sit super heavy in your stomach. But when you get back, okay, well, maybe we don't need to like load up on all of like the soda and the chips right away. We can choose something that's going to support that recovery process so we can repair, replenish what we just used, and then set you up for the next workout, whenever that is, if that's in a few hours or if it's the next day. So that's kind of how I talk to folks about like, okay, can we be strategic throughout the day of making sure that you're eating meals regularly and that we're getting our rocket fuel, not our junk car fuel. And knowing too, it's like there's a time and a place for the fun foods. Maybe it's not every single day at every single meal.
Yes, yes, yes. That's one thing it's hard to talk with about to kids, like, because they don't get it. They're like, but this one's good. This one is not good.
Yeah.
Clearly, the flavor is different,
Right. I know in our house, and I don't know how it is in your house, we talk about like our sometimes foods versus our all the time foods. And
Right.
right. So it's like, sure, you can always have your vegetables and a piece of fruit. We can make these choices that are going to nourish your body and help you grow big and strong.
Yes. My kids are big into muscles. So I'm like, this one makes your muscles grow faster. So we talk about that a lot, but not like, well, this is bad food or not. I actually change some of it the way I say it. So I'll say, we only like to eat fast foods that help you run fast. And then the other foods are slow foods. They make you feel sluggish and slow. So we say that at our house, because my kids like to run around and all the time. And I'm like, this one will make you run faster.
I mean, fast is also that state of mind, right? Like,
Yes,
do
it
you
is.
feel
It is
fast?
so.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine.
And so this is a great way we can segue into talking a little bit about energy and how fueling kind of helps with your energy. I know a lot of people have crashes during the day,
Yeah.
and you can tell us a little bit about electrolytes because I think this is a topic that a lot of people are kind of confused on, and they think, "Oh, the only way to get electrolytes is with Gatorade."
Okay.
We can start with energy.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I think a lot of people consider those things paired together, like, "Oh, I need my electrolytes so I can."
Yeah, or I need my energy drink. I need my
Right,
2 PM
right, be at the
coffee.
gym.
Yes, my pre-workout.
Yes, yes.
So, when we talk about energy, like from like just your body's perspective, energy comes from calories, which means food, not necessarily caffeine. Caffeine can be a helpful tool. I mean, I certainly like we talk in my house like mom is a better mom with my coffee, so I'm not anti-caffeine. I'm just not caffeine for breakfast and only coffee for breakfast. So, that being said, when we talk about energy, one of the things that I like to look at with the people that I work with is, are you eating well throughout the day? Are you eating breakfast? Are you waiting until like way late to eat and then you're just having like a bar? And then, of course, 3 o'clock rolls around and you're exhausted because your body is just basically running on fumes. So, when we look at, okay, can we add in like a balanced breakfast? Can we add in a balanced lunch? Or in some cases, we have to start where we start. So it's, can you eat something? Not even balanced, but I just need you eating food first thing in the morning and then eating lunch. And then we kind of track to see where energy is. Because one of the things that I often will see is, okay, we're restricting in the morning, we're restricting at lunch. We feel this afternoon crash, and then dinner rolls around, you're starving. And then people will say things like, I feel so out of control with my food. It's like, well, your body is trying to protect you and trying to bring on as many calories as it can because it thinks that you're like wandering in the desert starving. It doesn't know the difference between either intentional or unintentional restriction and starvation.
It just assumes the latter.
So when we understand like behaviors and just how we feel from those terms or that perspective, I find it really helpful of like, okay, well, now I can work with my body instead of feeling like I'm fighting against my body which is a really empowering way to think about health and food is just like, no, we're all on the same team here. It's not me versus my body. It's me in my body.
Love that. And so now I want to just ask you because I love asking this question. And these are really popular topics I'm noticing now. People are saying, oh, I'm taking creatine or, oh, I need my electrolytes. And they have no idea what they are. And I know that creatine is not a natural food product at all. And then electrolytes, there are good sources of electrolytes and not so good sources of electrolytes. You know, if you're doing an endurance sport or something and you drink a Gatorade, it's different than drinking it every day when you're not working out. So tell us a little bit about those, if
Yeah.
you would.
Absolutely. So let's start with the electrolytes and then we'll move on to the creatine. So, electrolytes, at the end of the day, mostly what we're talking about is sodium or salt. So, when you think of like, what is it that's in your sweat? Like, how many people have stopped to think about like what's in sweat? Maybe your kids. I don't know if like, they're like, Mom, why am I salty? So, we look at, what are the ions what are the minerals that are in your body, like in the fluid in your body, and that ends up being a lot of what we sweat out. The biggest one, like I said, is salt. So a lot of these electrolyte replacement type drinks, whether that's Gatorade or we've got, oh my gosh, like go to any sports store, go to any like grocery store, like nowadays, and there's like a million products on the shelves.
Right.
By and large, those electrolyte products are going to be mostly sodium. Now, the average American who's not working out, who's not sweating a lot, probably doesn't need those. So, in fact, most Americans get way more sodium than their bodies actually need. And that can cause like a whole host of other complications with blood pressure, especially. So, when we're looking at who needs electrolytes and when, my kind of rule of thumb is if you're working out for an hour or more, we definitely want to add a little bit of salt into whatever it is that you're drinking. And we're going to add some carbohydrates too, because again, like the carbs are where we're getting our fuel. If you're working out like 30 minutes or more and it's really hot and you're sweating a ton, then maybe we add just some electrolytes and maybe not. We might not need the extra carbohydrates, especially if you've eaten well, like going into that workout. And then the amount that you need, it really varies. There is not like a specific like goal. It's going to depend on a number of factors. And I know that's not a really satisfying answer, but
It's really a good answer, though. It's a very adequate answer
yeah.
because it's how it is.
Yeah, there's a lot about my job that people ask me these general questions and the answer is, well, it depends.
No, but that's
Yeah.
the answer.
Yeah.
It depends.
Absolutely. Yeah. So people typically know, like athletes know, if you like finish a workout and you're just like covered in white powder, that's
You
salt.
need some.
Yeah, you need
Yeah.
some extras. And especially for like a really long day, even if it's a little on the cooler side. Like I did a marathon last year that was like 50 degrees and raining the whole time. So not super fun from like a weather perspective. You kind of lose that like sensation of like, oh, I should be drinking and I need
Right.
salt because you're just cold and wet and you just want to finish and get warm, but you still need salt if you're doing like more than an hour, even if it's cold, even if it's raining.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you find this, but I think a lot of people forget that you can get kind of that replacement from, I don't know, like in the summer, you sweat more. Watermelon is available. Some people salt that.
Yeah.
You can get it that way. You can eat a tomato with some salt on it. So, like, there are options.
Even things like I have people say like, "Oh, I really crave like pretzels or potato chips after a run when it's really hot." It's like, yeah, you need the salt from that. Or even things like bread or um I mean so many other just like regular food. If we're adding salt to that, like congratulations, you got your electrolytes today.
Right, right. Yes, well, I find that, like, especially being pregnant, people are always, "You need to get your electrolytes," and they don't tell anyone what to actually get that from. So that was an important topic for me to address because I hear this a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And you mentioned Gatorade. So I just
Yes.
wanted to kind of like go back to that too, because there's so many great options out there that And even within Gatorade, it's like you have like the Gatorade Endurance and then you have the Gatorade Zero like they're not all created
Right.
equally, but there's better products out there. It's not the end all be all.
Yes. It was just kind of one of the first ones that came out, so that's why
Yes.
everyone knows this name, and
Yes.
I threw it out there.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I actually live nearby the school where they started it. I did not go there, so
Yes, I know people who have, and they're all about the Gators. So I love that for them.
yes,
And I love that, yeah, the science continues to evolve and yes, the University of Florida was the first place where we started having that conversation and the science just again, it like keeps
because
coming
it's
along.
very hot and sweaty here, and
Yeah.
that's why they just had to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And then can you tell us a little bit about creatine? Can you tell us a little bit about that? It makes you think better, it makes you do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us from your perspective about creatine.
Okay. So creatine I I will admit, like, I had to do my own, like, going down the rabbit hole of the primary literature not that long ago because at least, like, when I did my undergrad degree, like, no one was talking about it, like, in my nutrition program. There were, like, a couple guys because listen, my profession is dominated by women. The
Yes.
few men that you see in the field of dietetics tend to get into it because they wanna go into sports dietetics. I didn't think that I would become a sports dietitian, and yet here I am. So, it's not something that I learned about in school. It's something that I remember I was on, like, a continuing education call, and the topic came up, and I got turned on to the research. So, no, it does not kill your kidneys. I'll dispel that myth. So, that was something that I had also heard of like, oh, it's really bad for your kidneys. You shouldn't do it. That actually came from a single observation study on one person who had a pre-existing kidney condition who happened to tell his doctors, by the way, I'm also taking creatine. And so that's where that connection came from originally. That thought of like, well, creatine's going to kill your kidneys. It doesn't. Your body will naturally produce some level of creatine. And if you happen to eat meat, you're actually getting creatine from the meat that you're eating. It's one of the components of muscle. If you don't eat meat, don't worry. You can supplement, you don't have to. The idea with supplementation for athletes is that creatine is part of the pathway for generating really quick energy, really quick like muscle movement. So, of course, this first came up with like weightlifters or powerlifters or
That's what I was gonna mention.
bodybuilders. Yes. So people who wanted to lift heavier and get better in the gym were taking creatine. What ends up happening when you take creatine is that your muscles end up able to store more water and more glycogen. Glycogen is a storage form of carbohydrate in your muscles. So for power lifters, it can be really helpful, especially if they have not fueled well going into their lifts because they need that energy. Even bodybuilders, they're not getting energy from protein, they're getting energy from carbohydrates. The protein is just repairing the muscles or replacing the protein that their body broke down to use for carbohydrate because bodies are amazing and that's the thing that we can do. But one of the reasons I don't recommend exercising while fasted or on an empty stomach or empty tank. But creatine, we've now seen benefits for things like endurance athletes, where if we take regular doses, small doses, it doesn't take a lot. If we're taking regular doses of creatine, it can help again with building some of that muscle mass and also storing additional water and carbs that your body can use later, especially for these really long endurance events where we're just chasing our water and we're chasing our fuel. We're not able to replace everything that we're using in the moment. We're starting to see some research come out around women's health, especially women who are approaching perimenopause or postmenopause, where creatine can actually be really beneficial for their brain health. So this is one like, yeah, it's kind of sort of snake oil, but like the science does support it. It's reasonably safe if we're taking it in low levels. I always tell people, tell your doctor if you're taking it before you go in for blood work. Otherwise, it's going to look like your kidneys are maybe not doing so hot because one of the measures that we use for kidney health is a marker called creatinine. And as creatine breaks down, if you're taking an external source of creatine, if you're taking a supplement, it can show up in your blood work to look a little funny. And if you're not sure, like just stop taking creatine a couple weeks before your blood work, tell your doctor, like, hey, I've been taking this, and then we can interpret those results with that information. In terms of brain health, there's some emerging evidence that, okay, if you've had a concussion right away, you can take a high dose of creatine for about a week. There's some evidence that that could help, but with those studies, I just kind of advise caution because we don't have really big numbers. Uh,
Right. It hasn't been widely taken yet, like for them to come up with really good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe it's one of those things like it's relatively safe. I always recommend though like making sure that your creatine is third party tested because there is a risk for heavy metal contamination depending on the method that they used in the laboratory to produce that creatine. So just kind of word to the wise, look for a third party testing on that supplement if that's something that you're interested in doing. Don't exceed the recommended dose. And for some people, like if they're having some kind of like stomach bloating or like slight GI upset when they start the creatine, cut your dose in half and see if that helps. And if it doesn't help, then see what happens if we go off of it. But that's kind of my 2 cents on creatine.
Perfect. That's what I was going for because I see a lot of people taking it and they're like, I don't know. It's good for weightlifting. Yeah. So I was hoping you had a good explanation for us.
Yeah.
I try to like pick topics that I see in the news or new products that I find. And then I would like to segue into talking about health conditions and how they can be reversed or minimized with diet, why it's important to focus on high nutrition, high nutrient dense foods for this and how it helps inflammation. Because a lot of these are linked in with the big I, inflammation.
Yes. Absolutely. So, oh goodness. It's a big time. I feel like we could talk for like
We don't have
3
to go
hours.
like
No,
super detailed on it, but
but like
just a little touch.
so, like really high level, I think I might have mentioned a few of these. So, things like diabetes, or especially insulin resistance, which is a big thing that we talk about these days, is heavily influenced by inflammation. It's heavily influenced by diet and lifestyle. Certain forms of cancer, not all cancer, but some forms, obviously, maybe not follicular thyroid cancer, but some forms of cancer, especially reproductive cancers. So think like breast cancer, prostate cancer. These are cancers that are also heavily influenced by what we're eating. Even chronic conditions we associate with metabolism. So thinking of high triglycerides, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, again, heavily influenced by inflammation, by the foods that we're eating. When we eat fruits and vegetables, as well as things like nuts, seeds, and whole grains, these foods contain chemicals that we call phytonutrients or phytochemicals, PHYTO. Phyto, as in from plants. Now, these are not specifically nutrients that our bodies need in the same way that we talk about like macros. People, you hear that thrown around a lot. Like, what are your macros? What are you macro counting? That's referring to carbohydrate, fat, and protein. These are like the extras. So they're not vitamins, they're not minerals, but they're little extras that help our bodies work better. It helps our bodies to reduce inflammation or those inflammatory processes that can kind of like gunk up the works if we're using back to that car analogy, right? So if we have like the extra stuff in the engine, things aren't going to work super well. But if we add kind of the things that are going to help clear it out and help our bodies naturally work better, that can help to bring down overall inflammation and just kind of chill things out. So, for example, if we look at, like, say, insulin resistance, because people talk about hormones a lot and hormone health and what's your insulin, right? If we look at how well that's working in our bodies, so insulin is like the key to unlock our cells to allow carbohydrates to go in. So, like after a meal, you've eaten ideally food, not just, macros or vitamins or minerals, right? We've eaten food. So, but how is our body processing that? So we release insulin, which is this beautiful hormone that allows that carbohydrate to get into our cells to either use for energy or to store. One of the common things that people do if they're dealing with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes is, well, I'm just not going to eat carbs. I'm going to go really low carb, high protein, maybe high fat. And what they're doing is depriving their bodies of that fuel source, but they're not actually addressing the reason why they were insulin resistant in the first place. And insulin resistance meaning, think like if you that lock gets kind of gunked up and then that key doesn't want to go in anymore. That's kind of what insulin resistance is. So instead of taking away the carbohydrates, what happens if we add all of these phytochemicals, these phytonutrients that help to calm down that inflammation, and it lets that key work that a little bit better. So it's one of the ways that we can use more plant-based foods basically as medicine.
They really are. You know, even the colors like the anthocyanins in plants and etc. Anthocyanins are like colorful, think like purpley and reddish color. For anyone listening, just in case I lost you at anthocyanins, like blueberries or those kind of fruits in there, disease fighting. And you see this on the packaging for them a lot if it's like a frozen blueberry, um, is what Deborah is talking about. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the phytonutrients or plant nutrients as a review for what phytonutrients means?
Yeah. Yeah, it just means nutrients that come from plants. That again, it might be we're getting these vitamins or provitamins, which just means our bodies can take this and convert it into the vitamin form that we need. Like vitamins are just kind of these extra compounds that our bodies require to undergo like all of the cellular processes that you might have slept through in high school biology. But think like if we're thinking back to that, like our bodies are comprised of like billions of cells. And so each of these cells requires certain tools to do the job that is required of it. And so that's like what vitamins are, is that, okay, we need these to survive. We need these to keep our cells alive. And the cells make up our organs, which make up our body. Yeah. So nutrients, again, it's just kind of, it might be things like, I'm sure you've heard the term antioxidants and free radicals. Like, what even is that? I'm going to do the best that I can here. Like having flashbacks to organic chemistry in college.
I can help with that if you need.
Amazing. I love that.
I liked it so much. I took it twice. Just a joke. I failed the first time.
I barely passed. So that was my sign. They're like, okay, you only need one semester of organic chemistry for a nutrition
For a
degree.
reason.
Yeah.
I had to take 2, but
You know, there's a reason I'm a dietitian, not a doctor. So it's okay.
there you go.
It's okay. One of many reasons. So when we look at like free radicals, what does that mean? That can come from a number of different places. So one, it can come from a lot of exercise. It's basically like, think, oh my gosh, I'm like, my mind is going to like these kids movies where like you have like the super ball that's like bouncing around, but it's like super powered super ball that's like bouncing around and destroying everything.
Right.
That's what a free radical is inside your body. That it's like bouncing around. It's this free, positively charged particle that's like bouncing around in your body, making a mess. And it can come from extreme exercise. It can just kind of naturally happen on its own. It can come from things like UV exposure or things like smoking or alcohol or, you know, these different sources of potential damage. An antioxidant is basically like the free radical catcher. So it comes in and it stops that free radical. It binds that free radical and prevents it from doing additional damage. And so it's protecting our cells, it's protecting our DNA from potential mutation, and it's just kind of allowing our body to work better. Does that sound like a satisfying answer?
That sounds perfect. I love the analogy. And so one of the things I like to do at the end of the interview is there anything that you are super, super passionate about in our topic that you just always have to get out there when you come across somebody? Can you tell us something like that? Do you have like one thing that you're really passionate about?
So one thing that I talk a lot about, and I opened up a little bit like in the last like series that I did on Instagram, talking about my experience with a colonoscopy recently. Another little health scare, because why not? For funsies. Remember that you have so much power and so much control in advocating for yourself and doing all of these things to make yourself feel better and help to prevent your risk for things like chronic disease. Low risk does not mean no risk. So even if we're undergoing all of these lifestyle changes and you're feeling amazing, if you feel something is off, if something feels like it's not quite right, please go get it checked out because ideally you want to hear that doctor say, you're probably fine, but let's follow up. So you never know what they're going to find.
I love that. Thank you for sharing your story and your knowledge. I really appreciate it. It has been so enlightening and wonderful speaking with you. Thanks for joining me today on the Emily Rassam Show. If you laughed, learned something, or at least didn't roll your eyes too hard, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep the coffee strong, your kids alive, and the dreams big.